It was the year 1952 when America first caught the flying saucer fever. A rash of strange sightings was reported in the skies over Washington, D.C. Were those unexplained radar blips, unidentified aircraft, or something much more outlandish? The Washington, D.C. sightings of the summer 1952 are also known as the Big Flap. But it all started in 1947 when a search and rescue pilot reported 9 saucer-like things flying like geese in a diagonal chain-like line. Their speed reportedly exceeded 1,000 miles per hour. Within mere weeks, the sightings of flying saucers were reported in 40 other states. Later, the explanations were found. The sightings were either hoaxes or misidentifications of known aircraft and natural phenomena, but a few cases remained unexplained. By 1952, the UFO investigation unit called Project Blue Book had been founded. It was led by Captain Edward Rubbold. He and his team would have continued to investigate a few dozen sightings per month, but for the April 1952 issue of Life magazine, with an eye-catching headline, "There is a case for interplanetary saucers." The article made quite a convincing case. It spoke about 10 unexplained UFO incidents, claiming that the flying objects were extraterrestrial in origin. According to the Washington Post, after the appearance of the article, the number of UFO sightings grew more than sixfold, from 23 in March 1952 to 148 in June. By July, the UFO mania was in full swing. All that was missing was a spark. And it happened before midnight on Saturday, July 19th, 1952. An air traffic controller at Washington National Airport spotted 7 slow-moving objects on his radar screen. They were far from any civilian or military flight paths. He called his supervisor and joked about a fleet of flying saucers. Simultaneously, 2 other air traffic controllers at National spotted a bizarre bright light hovering in the distance. It suddenly dashed away at breakneck speed. At Andrews Air Force Base, located nearby, radar operators detected the same unidentified blips. Those were slow and clustered at first, but then they raced away at a speed higher than 7,000 miles per hour. One Andrews controller looked out of his tower window and spotted something he later described as an orange ball of fire with a tail. A commercial pilot flying over the Virginia and Washington, D.C. area saw 6 streaking bright lights resembling falling stars without tails. 2 jets were sent to search for the UFOs, but every time they got close to the locations shown on the radar screens, the weird blips would disappear. By dawn of July 20th, the objects were gone altogether. Ruppold, the lead investigator of Project Blue Book, found out about the sightings just a few days later after flying to Washington, D.C. and reading news reports. He tried to get to National and Andrews to interview the radar operators and air traffic controllers, but wasn't allowed to take a government-issued car. He had to fly back to Ohio with nothing. In a few days, UFOs were back over the Capitol. The same radar blips appeared again. Radar operators were wondering whether those dozen or so objects could be caused by a temperature inversion. That's a common occurrence in DC's muggy, scorching summer months. It occurs when a layer of warm air forms in the low atmosphere. It traps cooler air beneath. In this case, radar signals can bounce off the layer at shallow angles and create an impression of near-ground objects in the sky. To be safe, 2 more aircraft were sent to chase down the unidentified targets. The jets raced to a location targeted by radar, only for the blips to disappear. Eventually, one of the plane pilots saw a bright light in the distance and gave chase. But even though he was flying at maximum speed, he didn't manage to overtake the lights. At a press conference, representatives of the Air Force offered the public some easy-to-swallow explanations, having opted for the temperature inversion theory. After that, UFO sightings dropped from 50 a day to 10.
The Roswell Incident is a collection of events and myths surrounding the crash of a mysterious object in 1947. Right after rubber and metallic debris was recovered by Roswell Army Airfield staff, the United States Army claimed that they had their hands on a flying disc. Just a day after this announcement was made and made international headlines, it was retracted, but the word was already out. To hide the true nature of the find, the Army stated it was a good old weather balloon. But later in 1978, a retired Air Force officer revealed that it was just a cover story. At the same time, he added that he was sure that the debris had an extraterrestrial origin. This speculation became popular thanks to the 1980 book, The Roswell Incident. It also turned into the basis for long-lasting and increasingly contradictory and complex UFO conspiracy theories. Over time, they expanded the incident to include authorities hiding the evidence of other space civilizations, multiple crashed flying saucers, alien bodies, and even reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technology. However, none of those theories were based on any real evidence. But despite the absence of proof, many supporters of the UFO theory claimed that the Roswell debris was from a crashed alien craft. They accused the authorities of creating cover-up stories. This conspiracy narrative became a trope in movies, science fiction literature, and TV shows. No wonder that the town of Roswell is still promoting itself as the best destination for UFO-associated tourism. But what happened in this area in reality? The government's claim that a weather balloon had crashed at Roswell was indeed a lie. In 1994, the Air Force admitted that the recovered debris had actually been from an American balloon used to watch other nations. It was part of Project Mogul, an attempt to monitor anticipated nuclear tests that could be conducted by other countries. In 1997, an Air Force report called the Roswell Report, Case Closed, suggested that all those stories about alien bodies could have come from civilian witnesses who had seen parachute crash test dummies. The report also suggested that the witnesses might have combined several different events in their memories: the Project Mogul materials, the crash of test dummies, and a few other accidents that had occurred in the area. For many supporters of the UFO theory, though, those explanations sounded like the authorities planned to cover up their interaction with extraterrestrial civilizations. After all, in 1947, the USA, as well as some other nations, was in the midst of the flying saucer craze. People reported seeing bizarre objects in the sky. They claimed those were spacecraft piloted by aliens. It was against such a hectic background that a rancher discovered some highly unusual debris near Roswell, New Mexico. The material included tinfoil, sticks, and rubber strips. The next month, he took his findings to the Roswell sheriff. The man contacted the Roswell Army Airfield. After getting the wreckage, they issued that very extraordinary press release claiming that a flying disc had been found at a local ranch. The reasons for such an outrageous statement were unclear. In any case, the Roswell Daily Record picked up this press release right away, printing the story on the 8th of July with the headline, "RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region." That's when the military backtracked, announcing that it had been just a weather balloon carrying a radar target. That's a device that looks like a box kite made of foiled paper fastened to a balsa wood frame. The Roswell Morning Dispatch paid attention to this new claim and released a new story called "Army Debunks Roswell Flying Disc as World Simmers with Excitement." Imagine living in a world where technology has reached its highest point. Your daily routines are orchestrated by an AI, which anticipates your every need, from brewing your morning coffee to selecting a perfect evening outfit. The cityscape outside the window of your floating home is a marvel of efficiency. Flying pods whisk people to their destinations. Renewable energy sources power the giant megacity, creating an environment of pristine streets and clean air. At work, you have online meetings with colleagues living across galaxies, collaborating on projects that go beyond our current understanding. It sounds like a sci-fi story, but some extraterrestrial civilization might have already reached this level of development. Scientists started pondering the possibility of life beyond Earth long ago. They've been wondering what such life could look like and how humans could identify it from afar. This train of thought led to the development of several classification systems, including one called the Kardashev scale. It was proposed in 1964. This classification evaluates hypothetical alien civilizations based on how much energy they are able to harness. According to the scale, there are 3 types of civilizations. The first type is a technological level close to the current level of Earth. Type 2 is a civilization capable of harnessing the energy emitted by its own star. And the third type is a civilization that has learned to use the energy of an entire galaxy. This scale sure caught people's imagination. It was included in a 5-page paper called Transmission of Information by Extraterrestrial Civilizations. This work focuses on calculating how powerful a light signal from any point of the universe should be for us to detect it. Now, within the basic categories, humans are a Type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale. But some experts claim we aren't even a 1, since we haven't managed to harness the equivalent of the entire energy of Earth. This makes us more like 0.7, and of course, we're far from being a 2, a civilization with a working Dyson sphere. A Dyson sphere is a theoretical mega-engineering project encircling a star with platforms that are orbiting it in a tight formation. It might be the ultimate solution for living space and energy production. With its help, the creators of this ginormous construction could have loads of surface area for living and the ability to capture every tiny bit of solar radiation produced by their main star. As for a Type 3 civilization, it extracts fusion and exotic energy, information, and raw materials directly from their galaxy. This civilization is capable of space travel via wormholes, intergalactic communication via subspace, and galaxy-scale influence. They have supreme access to energy and are spread all over the universe. After millions of years of evolution, a Type 3 civilization may actually be AI superintelligences. Androids, cyborgs, and humans may be considered subspecies in such a highly advanced galactic society. In the most hopeful scenario, humans would have found a way to coexist with their AI masters. Or there might be no humans in that world whatsoever. This civilization might have already ascended into beings of pure energy, capable of controlling and directing machines to carry out all kinds of work. Now, back to the Kardashev scale. Even though it focuses only on technosignatures, it acknowledges biosignatures too, suggesting that each search should inform the other. The discovery of the simplest organism, for example, on one of Saturn's moons, could increase the probability that many Type 2 civilizations exist in our galaxy. At the moment, SETI is the main player in the field of looking for extraterrestrial civilizations. It's a combined effort of enthusiast scientists who focus on receiving and analyzing signals from space in the radio and visible light regions of the electromagnetic spectrum. It's looking for non-random patterns that have been likely sent deliberately by technologically advanced beings. The first modern SETI search was Project OMA in 1960. It used a radio telescope in Green Bank, Virginia. SETI uses targeted searches concentrating on groups of nearby sun-like stars.
It's the year 1977, and astronomers are stunned. They've just picked up a bizarre and really powerful radio signal coming from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. The signal shockingly matches the frequency of neutral hydrogen. What's the big deal? This is the very frequency many astronomers believe might be used by extraterrestrial civilizations trying to communicate. Since then, the signal has become legendary in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, aka SETI, community. But what exactly was that mysterious signal? To understand this, let's go back to the 1970s when the Ohio State University Big Ear Radio Telescope was active. For more than 2 decades, from 1973 to 1995, it played a major role in the university's SETI program. By the way, it was the longest-running SETI project in history. And in 1977, Big Ear detected something extraordinary, the WOW signal. This wasn't just any signal. It was a strong narrowband radio signal, right near the important neutral hydrogen frequency. The Big Ear telescope might be gone now, but the mystery of the WOW signal still fascinates scientists today. Imagine this. You want to tell an extraterrestrial civilization about humans. How would you describe our average height? We can't use feet or inches because these units mean nothing to them. even here on Earth, we don't all use the same measurements. To communicate with other civilizations, we need a universal way of conveying information. Luckily, the emission of light by matter comes from an electron jumping between quantum states in an atom. This process, governed by quantum mechanics, results in specific and fixed radiation frequencies and wavelengths, no matter where you are in the universe. Since we believe the laws of physics are the same everywhere, these wavelengths are universal. This makes them a perfect standard of measurement that any civilization could understand. For example, on the Pioneer spacecraft's gold plaque, we used a particular wavelength as a unit of length to describe information about humans and the spacecraft's origin. So, if an extraterrestrial civilization wanted to talk to us, they could have used the frequency of the WOW signal. And that's pretty amazing. The signal lasted the entire 72 seconds that Big Ear was tuned in. A few days later, astronomer Jerry R. Amon was looking over the data when he spotted the unusual signal on a computer printout. He was so surprised that he wrote "wow" next to it, and that's how the signal got its famous name. The signal also has another, not so exciting name, 6EQJ5. Some people thought it might be a hidden message, but it actually just shows how the signal's intensity changed over time. The WOW signal sparked all kinds of theories. Some people believed it was a sign of extraterrestrial life, while others were sure that it was some interference from human activities. There were those who believed it could be a natural phenomenon we didn't understand yet. New research seems to have finally solved the mystery, but there's one thing we'll talk about a bit later. First, let's get into detail. A team of scientists, led by Abel Mendez from the Planetary Habitability Laboratory at the University of Puerto Rico at Arecibo, revisited the mystery using data from the now-closed Arecibo Radio Telescope, collected between 2017 and 2020. These observations were similar to those made by Big Ear, but they had better sensitivity, resolution, and polarization measurements. Arecibo detected signals similar to the WOW signal, but there were some important differences. These signals were less intense and came from multiple locations. The scientists believe that these signals, including the original WOW signal, can be explained by natural events in space. Their theory sounds like this. The WOW signal was likely caused by a sudden brightening of hydrogen due to a strong, short-lived radiation source. It could be a magnetar flare or a soft gamma repeater, SGR. A magnetar is a neutron star with a way stronger magnetic field than ordinary neutron stars. And an SGR is an astronomical object which emits large bursts of gamma rays and X-rays at irregular intervals. In any case, such events are pretty rare and depend on very specific conditions. But they can cause hydrogen clouds to light up for short periods. According to the researchers, what Big Ear picked up in 1977 was one of those bright hydrogen clouds in its line of sight. The study suggests that the signal's rarity can be explained by the precise alignment needed between the radiation source, the hydrogen cloud, and the observer. It means that the WOW signal may actually be the first recorded instance of an astronomical maser flare in the hydrogen line.
In the middle of the previous century, flying saucers were constantly making headlines. America was going through a surge of reported UFO sightings. So it shouldn't probably come as a surprise that the American authorities, namely the US Air Force, created a couple of short-lived programs. Those were Project Sign and Project Grudge, and their main goal was to look into that phenomenon. These programs were followed by likely the most famous of them all, Project Blue Book. It was a large-scale government study that lasted from 1951 to 1969. The initiator of this program was Major General Charles P. Cabell. He was a former intelligence director of the Air Force. Project Blue Book scrupulously gathered over 12,600 reports about people seeing bizarre unidentified objects in the sky. After thorough research, it was determined that most of those had natural, quite mundane explanations. As for the rest of the reports, the members of Project Blue Book simply didn't have enough data to evaluate them. That's why support for their efforts dwindled. Officially, Project Blue Book was closed in December 1969. But apparently, it didn't make American authorities lose interest in UFO sightings. Because in mid-December 2017, the world found out that they had secretly launched one more UFO research program in the late 2000s. Accordingly to certain documents, American authorities spent around $22 million over a 4-year span on a project called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, aka AATIP. This project was started in 2007, and its main goal was to study UFO phenomena. Most likely, all this activity was triggered by the 2004 Tic Tac incident. That's when a few U.S. Air Force pilots spotted unidentified flying objects off the coast of California. They captured them on video. None of the pilots could figure out what these objects were. They behaved in a weird way, as if our laws of physics didn't apply to them. They were reportedly flying extremely fast and rotating in unpredictable movements. It looks as if after that incident, American authorities decided to investigate whether those objects could be identified or not. And if not, they were eager to know where they had come from and if they had been a threat. When the New York Times story about the new project broke, officials announced that the study had been terminated in 2012. However, there were people who claimed that the program was still ongoing. One of those was a military intelligence official running the program until they quit in October 2016. In any case, let's have a closer look at this mysterious program. Indeed, the areas of research funded by the project resembled things you could find in Star Trek. For example, one grant was for the study of traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy. This study was conducted by Eric W. Davis of EarthTech International, Inc. Another grant sponsored the research of invisibility cloaking. One more area of study included warp drive, dark energy, and the manipulation of extra dimensions. This research was conducted by a theoretical physicist and director of the nonprofit Icarus Interstellar. As we've already mentioned, all these studies received at least $22 million of funding, but this sum could have been much bigger. No one has revealed why or how these studies were given such huge grants under the AATI program. The results of the study aren't known publicly either. The criteria for choosing these fields of research could be that warp drives and stargates might be useful for extraterrestrial civilizations traveling interstellar distances to visit our planet. Still, some people are not amused that such questionable fields of study were receiving substantial government funding. One of the best and most convincing pieces of evidence that extraterrestrial civilizations have visited Earth could be the epic Nuremberg space battle of April the 4th, 1561. It was recorded either in 1561 or 1566. Different sources provide different information. All the retellings of this story focus on the woodcut picture and a vague summary of events that occurred that day. The emphasis is always on crashed spaceships and space battles. Almost everywhere you read or hear the story, it goes like this. The inhabitants of the city woke up early on an April morning and saw a staggering celestial show that looked like a real space battle. This story sounds even more convincing when you find out that some objects allegedly fought for quite a while. And some even crashed. You can see them in the lower right corner. Look at the picture once again. Orbs and crosses fighting, a giant arrow and bizarre tubes, crashing ships. Wow, that had to be a spectacular cosmic battle. To make it all more plausible, Hans Glaser, the artist behind the woodcut, was a very real person. He really did woodcuts, and this one is indeed from the time and place that it says it is, meaning it's not fake, and it does depict a real event that had its own witnesses. For all intents and purposes, it looks like very convincing proof of aliens visiting us, but don't get your hopes up. A superficial perusal of facts seems to confirm an extraterrestrial presence on our planet. But the most likely explanation is much more mundane. The Nuremberg 1561 UFO battle is just an atmospheric phenomenon called a sundog, or parhelion. A sundog is a concentrated spot of sunlight that can sometimes be seen to the right or to the left of the sun, or even on its both sides simultaneously. Sundogs often appear as a pair of patches of light with subtle colors at the same altitude over the horizon as the sun. They can have a variety of forms, from colorful spots to patches of light so intense and bright, it looks like there are two additional suns in the sky. Sundogs are weird looking enough to make it seem that something scary and otherworldly is going on in the sky. At the same time, it's just our planet's atmosphere or ice in the upper parts of the sky acting as a prism or reflective device. This prism makes the light from the sun or moon do weird things. This image can help you visualize the phenomenon. Apparently, Nuremberg had the perfect conditions for this phenomenon to occur. If you examine the depiction of this event and compare it with modern pictures and videos, you'll soon realize that a sundog is indeed a more likely explanation than the galactic empire paying us a visit. Let's find the proof of this statement in the translated description of these events and in the woodcut picture itself. First, the sun showed and was seen with two blood-colored half-round strokes, like the diminishing moon right through the sun, and in the sun, above, under, and on both sides, stood blood-colored and partly bluish, or iron-colored, also black-colored round orbs. Now here's the photo of a sundog. It has a halo surrounding it, and a red orb. And if we have at least one red orb, there could be others showing up during other events. Plus, keep in mind that sundogs are like prisms. So, depending on how light is reflected, there could be multiple colors present during such a phenomenon. Now, referring to circled plates mentioned in the description, those could be halos. For example, this sun halo looks vaguely plate-like, and it seems to be linked to other sun halos. And indeed, people have seen halos with multiple orbs. Some of the orbs could have taken a cross-like shape. If we watch some modern videos of sundogs, we might notice that the orbs on film are sun-colored. But since the Nuremberg event happened between 4 and 5 a.m., the clouds and the sun could have had reddish and orange hues. As for the fighting, it could be as simple as one shape moving a bit and changing shape along with the movements of the sun. It could have looked as if it was pushing the other shapes out of the way. Do you agree with the scientific explanation? Or do you prefer to think that Earth was visited by guests from a galaxy far, far away? Write your opinion in the comments.
Hi everyone. Today we'll be talking about the controversial music that astronauts once heard in space. A few years ago, NASA made public the recording of a bizarre music that the astronomers from Apollo 10 reported hearing in May 1969, while they were flying over the far side of the moon. At that moment, they were out of radio contact with Earth. This happened months before the first astronaut set foot on the lunar surface. There were 3 people on board: Thomas Stafford, John Young, and Eugene Cernan. The sounds lasted for about an hour. Astronomers managed to record them and transmit them to Mission Control in Houston. Now, I want you to listen to these whistling sounds.
That music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? You hear that? That whistling sound? Yeah.
Don't they resemble some kind of otherworldly outer space music? So the question is, could the astronauts have heard alien music coming from outer space? Well, there's another more simple, non-alien involving explanation for this cosmic phenomenon, but we'll talk about it a bit later. In the audio recording from the Apollo 10 mission, astronaut Eugene Cernan, who was piloting the lunar module, could be heard asking John Young, piloting the command module, if he could hear that whistling sound. Cernan was the first one to call these sounds music and to add that they were kinda outer spacey. Later, when the 2 astronauts asked Tom Stafford, who was in the lunar module with Cernan, if he could hear the sounds too, he confirmed it and stated that they were really weird. Young suggested they should find out more about them. Nobody will believe us, he added. Apollo 10 was a mission that paved the way for Apollo 11, which landed 2 humans on the lunar surface. The Apollo 10 astronauts flew to the moon in a command module. However, 2 of the crew members also had a ride in the lunar module, which allowed them to drop down to less than 10 miles above the moon's surface. So, since they managed to approach our natural satellite so closely, could they have heard something coming from the lunar surface? Well, apparently not. Turns out that the creepy whistling sound was nothing more than some interference between the VHF radios on the two different vehicles. Interestingly enough, Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins later wrote in his book, Carrying the Fire, that NASA technicians had warned him about the whistling. He also mentioned that if he hadn't known about the origins of this music, it would have scared him to no end. In 2008, NASA shared the transcripts of the Apollo 10 transmission, but according to the documents themselves, they were declassified in 1982. In 2012, NASA also shared the audio files online. If you listen to these files, you'll hear that the astronauts sound sincerely awed and puzzled by what they hear. Moreover, they bring it up over and over again. It's also worth mentioning that you never actually feel that the three men were panicked or alarmed while going over the transcript or the audio. Some sources put particular emphasis on the fact that the space music started when the astronauts were over the far side of the moon. They didn't have radio or visual contact with mission control for about an hour, something that had been expected. Some documentaries used this moment to create tension by saying things like, the astronauts were on their own. No one on Earth could see or hear them. However, the narrators never explained why the astronauts' isolation could have been such a significant factor. By no means was it connected to the not-so-mysterious sounds undersourced. There's another interesting element to this story that we should consider though, and it's the fact that Apollo 10 astronauts never discussed this incident and the sounds publicly. However, it's still unclear whether they talked about it with NASA engineers. This makes some people speculate that the astronauts didn't want to project anything but a rock-hard psyche. Showing a drop of confidence even once during the whole mission could have left them out of the whole project. Hi, my name is Martin. I am the author of this channel, and today I'll tell you all about the evidence of astronauts meeting with unidentified things at the time of observation. It's the year 1962, and American John Glenn is orbiting Earth in his Friendship 7 capsule on the Mercury Atlas 6 flight. He looks out of the window and sees fireflies.
Well, maybe those are not fireflies, but he clearly sees some weird bright specks clustered around the ship. Unsurprisingly, he tries to find a logical explanation. Can they be ice crystals from the spacecraft's hydrogen peroxide attitude control rockets? But Glenn is unable to correlate their appearance with the use of the rockets. The mystery remains unsolved.
Only much later will we find out what those fireflies were. You see, spaceships tend to accumulate clouds of debris and contamination around themselves. And when Glenn's rockets sprayed jets of crystals, many of these crystals accumulated in the cloud. They reflected sunlight and interacted with other gases, looking like tiny sparkles. The case of the mysterious fireflies is now officially solved.
But it isn't the darkest space tale. One of the most famous cases of seeing bizarre stuff in space comes from Apollo 11. That's when Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins noticed a UFO pacing along with them during their flight to the moon. That's how the astronauts described this incident. We did watch a slow blinking light some substantial distance away from us. There was something out there, close enough to be observed. The period of uncertainty was rather brief. The astronauts and ground control soon identified the object. It was one of the 4 adapter panels that fit between the 3rd stage and the lunar module. These panels were ejected from the 3rd stage, and one of them continued along the same trajectory as the lunar module with the crew. While moving, it rotated and blinked when sunlight was reflected off its surface.
Another famous and truly creepy picture hinting at the presence of alien life on the moon was taken by the crew of Apollo 16.
As the astronauts were leaving our natural satellite, they made a video, and 4 seconds of it showed a near-perfect Hollywood flying saucer leaving behind a plasma trail. For more than 30 years, enthusiasts used this video to prove that aliens had paid us a visit.
But then, scientists decided to take the matter into their own hands. They realized that, when viewed from the window through which the video had been taken, the object in the film was actually consistent with a small floodlight sticking out from the side of the capsule on a boom.
Look, from this angle, the floodlight looks exactly like a flying saucer. And the boom, indeed, looks like that plasma trail. And do you see this? Those are a couple of bolts on the boom.
Another report that inspired UFO enthusiasts came from Gemini 7. Astronauts Frank Borman and Jim Lovell were making what was called a football maneuver. It was supposed to get them into a position where they would make recurring close approaches with their Titan II booster stage every orbit.
But when they were performing this maneuver, Barman reported bogey at 10 o'clock high. We have several, looks like debris, up here, actual sighting. We also have the booster in sight. Yeah, have very, very many. Look like hundreds of little particles banked on the left out about 3 to 4 miles. It looks like a path to the vehicle at 90 degrees. They are past now. They were in polar orbit. Lovell claimed that the booster was in sight too, slowly tumbling along with the debris cloud. Does it mean that Bogman's bogey particles couldn't have been the booster or booster debris? After all, they were moving in a different direction, traveling along a different trajectory. Well, not necessarily. Later analysis showed that those particles were ice flakes from leftover fuel from the Titan II.
As you see, astronauts often report seeing weird stuff out there, but NASA's reaction is often anticlimactic. Let's have a look at how they commented on the statements of an astronaut who claimed to have witnessed alien presence in space.
NASA doesn't track UFOs. NASA is not involved in any sort of cover-up of alien life on this planet or anywhere else in the universe.
We should also remember that unidentified doesn't necessarily mean positively identified as an alien spacecraft. There's a lot of objects in orbit, and a lot of stuff travels along every mission. So, we'll always have UFO reports as long as we have space programs.
How is the death of the universe possible if the universe is infinite? The concept of the universe's death is more about its state and less about its size or infiniteness. Several theories predict how the universe could end, but they often focus on the thermodynamic properties, energy distribution, and the fate of matter over time, rather than the universe ceasing to exist entirely. Here are a few scenarios based on current scientific understanding: heat death or the Big Freeze. This is the most widely accepted scenario, based on the second law of thermodynamics. Over trillions of years, it's theorized that the universe will reach a state of maximum entropy, where all energy is evenly distributed and no work can be performed. The universe would be cold and dead, with all stars burned out, and every bit of energy spread out thinly across an ever-expanding cosmos. Big Rip. This theory suggests that the expansion of the universe, driven by dark energy, could continue to accelerate indefinitely. Eventually, this acceleration would become so powerful that it would tear apart galaxies, stars, planets, and finally molecules and atoms themselves. Big Crunch. The opposite of the Big Bang, this theory proposes that the expansion of the universe could reverse, causing the universe to collapse back on itself into a singularity. This scenario is less favored now because observations suggest the universe's expansion is accelerating, not slowing down. Big Bounce. This theory combines aspects of the Big Crunch with the idea of cyclic universes. It suggests that after a big crunch, the universe could bounce back and start expanding again, potentially leading to an infinite cycle of universes being born, dying, and being reborn. The concept of an infinite universe doesn't contradict these scenarios because infinity here refers more to the spatial extent rather than its lifespan or the distribution of matter and energy within it. Even in an infinite universe, the distribution of energy can become so even that no meaningful activity can take place, leading to a death of sorts in terms of the universe's ability to host life or undergo change. How can energy be distributed uniformly in an infinite universe? If the universe is infinite, then there must be infinitely many regions where energy is not evenly distributed. The concept of energy being evenly distributed in an infinite universe indeed presents a paradox when taken at face value. The idea primarily stems from thermodynamics applied to a more understandable, finite model of the universe. However, applying these principles to an infinite universe requires some nuance: local versus global uniformity. In an infinite universe, energy could become evenly distributed on a local scale, within observable regions, rather than globally. The observable universe, the part we can see and measure, might reach a state of maximum entropy, where energy within this region is evenly spread out. Beyond our observable universe, conditions could vary wildly, but those variations would have no effect on the state of entropy within our observable limits. The horizon problem. This issue is also related to the cosmological horizon problem, which the theory of cosmic inflation addresses. The horizon problem questions how parts of the universe are too far apart to have exchanged light, or any information, since the Big Bang appears to be at the same temperature. Cosmic inflation theory suggests that the universe expanded exponentially in a very short time period after the Big Bang, smoothing out any initial irregularities over a vast region. In this context, an even distribution doesn't necessarily mean perfectly uniform across infinity, but sufficiently uniform within the observable universe due to its rapid early expansion. The role of dark energy. The current accelerated expansion of the universe, driven by dark energy, adds another layer of complexity. If dark energy continues to accelerate the universe's expansion, it could lead to scenarios like the Big Freeze or the Big Rip. In these cases, while locally, within our observable universe, energy might become more evenly distributed as stars burn out and matter spreads thin, the global picture across an infinite universe might be far more complicated and beyond our current understanding. Theoretical limits. The discussion of energy distribution in an infinite universe touches on the limits of our current theories. General relativity, quantum mechanics, and thermodynamics are all based on observations and experiments within the observable universe. Extrapolating these theories to an infinite cosmos involves assumptions that may not hold universally. In summary, when physicists talk about the universe reaching thermal equilibrium or heat death, they're often referring to the observable universe. The concept of an infinite universe introduces complexities that challenge our current understanding, suggesting that the true nature of the entire cosmos could be far more intricate than our local observations can reveal.
Imagine simultaneously being born, growing up, and getting old somewhere out there in the universe. Sounds bizarre and unrealistic. And still, according to the block universe model of the world, that's exactly what happens with you, me, and other living beings on our planet. It's as if someone drew pictures about every moment of your life and then just piled them one on top of another, creating a giant block of all things that ever happen at any time and at any place. The future, present, and past exist at the same time and are equally real. The block has 4 dimensions. 3 of them are spatial. It's length, width, and height. There's one more, time. To make it easier, let's picture our world as a cuboid, which is basically a 3-dimensional rectangle. Its height and width represent 2 of the 3 spatial dimensions of the universe. As for the 3rd spatial dimension, we'll replace it with time. At one end of the cuboid, we'll drop the Big Bang. And at the other, there will be the end of the universe. Let it be a big crunch. Our cuboid is filled with every single event that ever happens. Even this moment, when you're watching this video, exists somewhere in the block. Now, we perceive today as the present, yesterday as the past, and tomorrow as the future. From this perspective, it seems that time passes. But in the block universe, time doesn't flow. There's no specific present moment since the notions of the past and future are relative. You see, we are always located wherever we are, which means that everyone remains in the present. But the block universe theory doesn't deny the notions of earlier than and later than. These relations remain no matter what and regardless of where anyone is located. For example, Molly the mammoth is located earlier than Marcus the tiger. This relation between Molly and Marcus will remain unchanged regardless of whether you're located later than Marcus or earlier than Molly. This way, in the block universe, now is any time you are located at. Past is any time or events that are earlier than your location, and future is any time or events that are later than your location. It sounds like in the block universe, we could travel in time since it's just another dimension. Well, it could be true, but of course, things just have to be more complicated than that. Traveling in time is way more difficult than traveling in space, but it's not impossible if you travel very, very fast. traveling at extremely high speeds results in time dilation. We can travel into the future at a reasonable percentage of the speed of light, and to get to the past, we can use wormholes, shortcuts through space-time. But if we can travel in time in the block universe, can we change the past? Not really, because if you do, it'll create a contradiction. Keep in mind that, in this universe, the past is the same as the present or the future. What is past to you is future to someone else. And when traveling to the past, you're going to someone else's future. In the past, you'll act just like you do in the present, but you won't be changing the past. All your actions are already predetermined in the block universe. At the moment of the Big Bang, it's already clear that at one point, you'll travel to the relative past. Just like what you do tomorrow makes tomorrow the way it is and has always been, what you do in the past makes it the way it is and has always been. The events in the block universe do not change. As a time traveler, you don't suddenly appear in the past. It's always been the case that you're located in the past. And nothing a time traveler does can change anything in the block. Instead, whatever you do at any time makes that time the way it is. A single brain filled with fake memories of having existed in our universe. Once, this brain just spontaneously formed in a void. Sounds like something from science fiction. But this brain could actually be me, or you. There is an idea that such a brain is more probable than an entire universe that came about in the manner cosmologists think it did. And this phenomenon I'm talking about is known as a Boltzmann brain. Let's see. A brain is coming into existence in our vast universe right at this second. And everything in this brain is forming at this moment. The memories of its previous life, obviously fake, its origin, its ideas, and the perspective of the universe. But this brain perceives itself as real. In this case, how will it know that its memories are artificial and its existence is no more than an illusion? This is what the Boltzmann brain paradox is about. It's the result of Ludwig Boltzmann's debate with other scientists on the interpretation of entropy. According to the second law of thermodynamics, the entropy, or disorder of a system, can stay the same or increase, but it can never decrease. Have you ever seen shattered glass return to its previous state? Neither have I. But Boltzmann stated that even though the probability of the entropy of a system staying the same or increasing is high, it doesn't mean that the probability of the entropy decreasing equals zero. This chance is just so small that it can be ignored. But everything changes when we speak about some infinite system. If such a system, for example a universe, has an infinite number of particles, there must be at least one possibility that these particles create something structured. Let's take an infinitely old universe. Such a universe means an infinite number of possibilities where the entropy increases, and a tiny chance of its reduction when particles come together and form a structure instead of existing randomly. So, Boltzmann took this idea of an infinitely old universe and ran with it. He claimed that at some point, all those randomly organized particles the universe contained could come together and form a structured system. Maybe this formation of a structure even led to the Big Bang. One more idea he suggested was of a local system existing in an infinitely large system. It could be a universe containing structure and life and existing in the infinite system of a dead multiverse. Such a multiverse would have no structure, which is what high entropy suggests. And since we know that in an infinite system, there can be only one possibility of entropy reduction. All other universes except one would be dead. Interestingly, Boltzmann said that we don't need an entire universe or even a galaxy to confirm the existence of structure in a dead multiverse. The only thing we need is just one intelligent observer. And what part of the body is responsible for consciousness and cognition? Right, the brain. It could be a single brain randomly existing somewhere in a high-entropy dead universe, containing memories of its entire life. Scientists had to admit the legitimacy of this paradox, and still, everyone was sure they could never be a Boltzmann brain. Everyone knew their existence was not artificial. But that's exactly what a Boltzmann brain would think. After all, it wouldn't know that its memories and existence are fake. This realization caused quite a commotion in the scientific world. People started to research the probability of one being a Boltzmann brain, and it turned out that the existence of a Boltzmann brain in an infinite universe is way higher than the probability of a human brain. Statistically, we are more likely to be Boltzmann brains than real breathing creatures. But it's too early to fall into an existential crisis. Sure, there's no way to find out whether you are a Boltzmann brain or not, but there's a catch. Do you remember that we've been talking about a Boltzmann brain in the context of a universe which has existed for an infinite amount of time? But our universe hasn't existed forever. On the other hand, what was there before the Big Bang? Nothing? Or a dead multiverse where all the particles came together and caused the Big Bang, which led to our structured universe? Sounds uncomfortably close to the description of the Boltzmann brain universe.
If the universe is everything, then there is nothing external for it to expand into. But we know for sure that it does expand. So the question is, what exactly is it expanding into? According to the theory of cosmic inflation, the universe was once filled with large amounts of energy. It was similar to hypothetical dark energy, but much greater in magnitude. It made the universe expand faster and faster. As a result, the universe was getting colder and emptier. And then, after growing this way for a very long, possibly infinite amount of time, most of this energy got converted into matter and radiation, which triggered the Big Bang. The Big Bang was the moment when the whole universe was squeezed into a tiny, super hot, and extremely dense ball we call a singularity. And all of a sudden, when it was less than 1 second old, this tiny ball started to unpack at speeds we can't even imagine. It was so hot that particles were moving extremely fast, crashing into one another and creating pairs with their opposites, like matter and antimatter. When the universe was 1/100th of a billionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second in age, it experienced an incredible burst of expansion that we know as inflation. At that moment, the universe doubled in size at the speed of light. And after that, it doubled in size at least 90 more times, growing from a subatomic-sized formation to a golf-sized structure almost instantly. After this burst of inflation, according to NASA, the growth of the universe continued, but it slowed down. As the universe kept expanding, it started to cool down, and matter formed. 1 second after the Big Bang, and the universe was already filled with neutrons, protons, electrons, anti-electrons, photons, and neutrinos. If we somehow managed to observe the universe when it was just a trillionth of a second old, we'd see that it was the size of Earth's orbit around the Sun. When the universe was a mere 1 second old, it was too hot for nuclear fusion to occur. At that time, its radius was just 10 light years, which is enough to enclose the 9 nearest star systems we know about. When the universe was 1 year old, it was smaller than our home galaxy and unbelievably hot. Finally hot enough to start nuclear fusion. When the universe was 3 years old, it was roughly the size of the Milky Way galaxy. When matter started to dominate radiation, which happened when the universe was around 10,000 years old, the size of the universe was about 10 million light years. It would be easy to think of the Big Bang and the resulting expanding universe as an ordinary explosion, where everything is expanding from a central point. But it's not a good analogy. There's a better one. Look at the surface of an inflating balloon. It'll be a 2-dimensional equivalent of our 3-dimensional universe. The balloon fabric will be space. These dots marked on its surface will represent galaxies. You see, they're moving apart as the balloon expands, but it happens only because the fabric, representing space itself, is expanding. The galaxies aren't moving on their own, and there's no central point for the expansion. The balloon is expanding into the 3rd dimension, and that's where the analogy is getting trickier. Does it mean that our universe is expanding into some higher dimension? If there's no larger multiverse and our universe is all there is, then there's nothing outside of it. Not even a vacuum, which is still part of space. It means there's no point in asking what the universe expands into. If there was a 2-dimensional being on the surface of our expanding balloon, they would be able to observe all distances in its surface 2D world getting larger. but they wouldn't see the third dimension into which the balloon is expanding. The same goes for us, three-dimensional creatures. We see the distances between galaxies growing, meaning the inflation of space, but we can't perceive additional space dimensions into which the expansion is moving beyond our three. Even if space is indeed expanding into some higher dimension, our current knowledge of physics doesn't allow us to find out anything about it. It's likely to be beyond our comprehension.
This is the James Webb Space Telescope, and this is how far we can see through its eyes. Impressive. But let's zoom further. Further! Further! The image is getting blurrier and blurrier. Wait! What is this shadow? It's a giant telescope capable of seeing those seemingly blurry images in perfect detail. NASA's Roman telescope is to be launched in 2027, and it might help us unravel the mysteries of the universe, including the essence of dark matter. No worries, James Webb will continue to show us the beauty of the cosmos and solve mysteries one by one. But astronomers have a new mission these days. They want to deploy the next, even bigger space telescope, and this mission is already well underway. The Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope is likely to start a new age for astronomy. Scientists hope that the telescope will gather more data than any other NASA mission has ever done. Hubble and Webb are incredibly good at zooming in to get a clear, detailed view of small parts of the sky. Meanwhile, Roman is going to provide us with a much wider field of view. It will be capable of creating infrared images 200 times larger than Hubble. At the same time, it will have a similarly high level of detail. But even though the new telescope will be able to produce perfect images, it's going to be used mainly for surveys. Let's say we need to look for the star population in a nearby galaxy. But it's a too large field of view for Hubble. If we use it, we'll have to stitch lots of different shots and create mosaics out of them. But with Roman, a picture of the entire galaxy can be taken in one single shot. Look at this recent mosaic of our neighbor, the Andromeda Galaxy. This image was put together using 400 individual images taken by Hubble. And Roman will paint the same ultra-vast picture with the same level of detail with just 2 images. It not only sounds cool, it also means an unprecedented amount of data collected. Once we have such a panoramic view of the universe, NASA and other space agencies will probably be able to answer some of the greatest questions that have been intriguing humanity for ages. One of the main goals is to test the theory of relativity suggested by Albert Einstein. It's been well tested on the scale of our solar system, but not so much on larger cosmological scales. According to this theory, visible matter is supposed to slow down the expansion of the universe. But the universe is expanding non-stop, and doing it faster and faster. So, astronomers attribute this ever-growing expansion speed to a mysterious component, dark energy. They believe that it makes up around 68% of the universe. Hopefully, Roman will provide us with data that will help us accurately measure the position and distance between us and millions of galaxies. Eventually, it might let us figure out the expansion rate of the universe in different areas. In the end, the results might tell us whether Einstein's theory of gravity needs modification. One more of Roman's main goals is to detect hundreds and thousands of new exoplanets within our home Milky Way galaxy. The telescope will be able to do it using the technique known as gravitational microlensing. You see, when 2 stars align with each other, the one positioned in front distorts and magnifies the light of the other star located behind. And if the star in the foreground has a planet, we can see how this planet affects the light of the star behind it. Roman will hopefully count billions of stars, providing us with a very good census of how many of these stars have exoplanets. The cutting-edge telescope will not only spot new exoplanets, it will also carry another crucial instrument called a coronagraph. It can image exoplanets that are close to their parent star. This is actually an extremely tricky technique since the starlight has to be suppressed. After all, it's much brighter than the objects you want to study. By those objects, I mean nearby planets. The chronograph on the Roman telescope will try to capture large Jupiter-like planets directly. by conducting live corrections to improve the quality of images. If it proves to work properly, the telescope will make a great demonstration instrument, forming the baseline for the technology that will be used on future space observatories. Such observatories will be capable of directly capturing Earth-like planets in the habitable zone of their parent stars. But the Roman Space Telescope isn't the only project that can change the way we explore space. There are other concepts, like Nautilus. It's an idea of a revolutionary space telescope based on a novel technology: special optical elements. Such elements can potentially allow us to overcome the main limitations of space telescopes: non-scalable primary mirrors. The Nautilus technology can provide large but ultra-light telescope apertures, enabling the launch of a massive fleet of identical telescopes. They will have an impressive light collecting power, which will help Nautilus survey thousands of Earth-sized planets located in the habitable zone of their stars. As a result, we might find atmospheric signatures of life on those planets. Over the past 2 billion years, the atmosphere of our planet has changed dramatically. The abundance of free molecular oxygen and ozone, which are highly reactive gases, together with water vapor and methane, represent a unique atmospheric composition. The presence of these gases, biosignatures, in the atmosphere of our planet is a sign of life that can be detected from afar. We're speaking about galactic distances here, but to identify such fingerprints of atmospheric components in the light reflected by or transmitted through the atmospheres of Earth-like planets, we need very large telescopes. NASA's Kepler mission has discovered more than 4,000 planets. And still, no existing, or even planned, space telescope has a diameter that is large enough to search for life in exoplanets' atmospheres. Finding and interpreting observations of extraterrestrial life correctly is very difficult. But the Nautilus team hopes to build a telescope capable of studying thousands of Earth-like planets. Then, there's the European Space Agency's Euclid mission. It's designed to explore the composition and evolution of the dark universe. The mission was named after Greek mathematician Euclid, who lived in Alexandria around 300 years BCE. He founded the subject of geometry, and since the density of energy and matter is tightly linked to the geometry of the universe, the mission was named in his honor. This space telescope will create a great 3D map of the large-scale structure of the universe across space and time. It'll do it by observing billions of galaxies across more than a third of the sky. Euclid will try to figure out how the universe has expanded and how its structure is formed over the course of cosmic history. Hopefully, it will reveal more about the role of gravity and the very nature of dark matter and dark energy. As we already know, dark energy likely accelerates the expansion of the universe. As for dark matter, it controls the growth of cosmic structures. But experts remain unsure about what dark energy and dark matter are. By observing the evolution of the universe over the past 10 billion years, we might finally figure out how it has been expanding and changing. From this, astronomers might infer the properties of dark energy, dark matter, and gravity. It could help find out more about their precise nature. The Euclid spacecraft is around 15 feet tall and 12 feet wide. It consists of 2 main components: the payload module and the service module. The payload module includes a 4-foot diameter telescope and 2 scientific instruments: a visible wavelength camera and a near-infrared camera, or spectrometer. As for the service module, it contains satellite systems, such as electric power generation and distribution, data processing electronics, thermal control equipment, and so on.